All right, Howard from Maxspect, join us, special guest again. We're going to go into the return pumps. Specifically, we're going to really dive into the uses for this one,
Right.
which may not be as straightforward as you think. But when you hear it all, you'll say, oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Let's find out. All right, so the very first thing is there is your standard return pump.
Yep.
We'll cover this one real quick. Tell me about this guy right here.
Well, it's one of the more affordable DC return pump that you can find in the market. It's got a DC controller. And I mean, for a lot of customers that we talked to, they were surprised at how quiet this return pump is. It's actually performing, out of the expectations.
I see the jump moniker on it, which basically means,
Yeah.
hey, we designed this thing to be affordable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Average person could afford this and use it. So this is the Maxspect jump. It
DC.
moves water.
Yep.
Not what we're talking about today. All right. It does exist as a reference point, but this is the cool one because this basically, I'm going to use these words, but tell me if they're accurate.
Okay.
Basically, this thing here uses the same kind of motor technology as a gyre to be a return pump. Is that true?
Well, yes and no, because the gyre using a rotor differently, but then the actual rotors that you use inside the pump, the design comes from the gyre pump.
Yeah. So this is kind of the same mantra of like one cord, one motor, multiple pumps. The gyre does that, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, all right. Before we get into it, most people would look at this and say, I don't know why I would want to use this. And that's because you haven't been, introduced to something like this before, and it's not real super straightforward. So the number one use that we discussed earlier was a manifold.
Right.
Explain.
Okay. Now, for example, in a lot of aquarium, you have a manifold that will drive your, let's say, chillers or your reactors. Typically speaking, you will have multiple pumps. One pump for return flow, and then one pump to drive your reactors, and another pump to drive, let's say, a chiller. Now, with the Turbine Duo, what you could do instead is that you can have one outlet, connect to your return, and the other one connects to your manifold.
So I had this on like the 160. We decided to use two pumps and two return pumps. And actually at first it was just one pump plumbed in, and it was going to provide, be everything.
Yeah.
And like what you kind of run into is getting the head pressure right, between all of that, and getting it to feed everything is actually kind of difficult. We had to add valves in to create artificial back pressure to even get water to go some directions. Now here, if I have just one pump, feeding into the tank, right? Even if I split it and had to go into both of the returns or a single return, and then this one is feeding the gear. What a really kind of interesting solution.
Yeah.
So that's number one. All right. Number two is a closed loop.
Closed loop, yep. We have a lot of hobbyists asking before we have this pump, what is the the best way to do a closed loop? Well, before we have this pump, there's no other solution. You have to use multiple pumps, right? And it's actually driving more power and adding more heat that we're going to talk about into your water.
So closed loops, I won't say are the most popular installed today because like power heads are so easy to use, right? But at the same time, like there are a lot of people that were like the nerdiest end of this bunch. Well, you'll drill holes and stuff like in the tank behind the aquascape and pump in little, like lock line and stuff in there, and have flow coming out and eliminate all the power heads entirely. And like the flow just kind of like coming out of the rock work or hidden. In this case, you could use, instead of using like one giant pump and trying to manifold it and get it to evenly spread out, and it will never do that. You can have, multiple of the duos and, do two outlets at once.
Yeah.
So, cool solution. Another one here was you could have two return lines essentially. So if you're one of those people that has a return on both ends.
Yeah, well, it's getting more popular now, especially for those peninsular tanks, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to have one from the other side, and what is better than having two, returns? You can have one coming from where the overflow box is, and the other one you can go underneath the tank and then go from the other side out.
Yeah, I mean, if all things semi remain the same, would I want one pump and then have to plumb it and split it?
Yeah.
Or could I just have one pump that has two heads on it and sends it out both?
Well, if you use split, you have to understand that you're losing, flow rate when you use every time you have a split, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you have an elbow, you're going to lose a lot of the flow. But now with the Turbine Duo, because they have different rotors driving the water, so you're not adding a split to it, but you're actually having two separate lines,
Very cool. And this one is something that you do, which is I got one driving my own tank, and then I have another one driving a what?
Yeah, like a frac tank or a secondary tank, or just even like a quarantine tank. I mean, if you have a small, like I did back home, right? I have a small tank where I used to put all my fracs, so I use this pump to drive that, and then one side go to the return, the other side go to my chiller and the side tank.
Mm-hmm. We've thought about this a lot with things like a clam refugium,
right, yes.
Look down display, but I don't want to add work of maintaining another tank.
Yeah.
In this case, I could just plumb it all in, and
right.
The only thing I really had to buy was the tank, and pour it off one of these things.
Right.
I think of types of coral and stuff that I might not want in the display.
Right.
I don't want the zoanthids and stuff to take over my SPS, but I like to look at them, especially in a top-down.
Right.
Frag tank is
frag tanks.
One.
Yes, a lot of people have fracs now.
When you got an SPS tank and the thing overgrows, it's kind of hard to know what to do, and you feel so bad. We can just throw it out.
Right.
So if you can grow them out, trade them to your store.
Right. Exactly. And some people like to have the frac racks, right? Taking up your main display tank. Mm-hmm. So what I did back then is I have a side tank and put all my fracs in it, so I can. I'm still using the same water, so I don't have to have separate filtration.
Yep. Okay, so there's some other benefits associated with this thing, but these are the primary uses. Mm-hmm. The manifold, the closed loops, you're having two return lines evenly distributed rather than trying to plumb it perfect, and then having a side tank, kind of cool solution. But there are some benefits to this design as well. So one of them is lower wattage for the flow.
Yeah,
so it takes up less power to get the same amount of flow.
Yeah, because we have dual output, right? So we are getting twice the flow without using more power, which in turns that will input less heat into your system. Especially from places like Florida or Southern California, where you have really hot summers, right? You have to turn on the chillers, and the more heat you're putting back in the tank, which means you have to pay more money on your energy bill.
Yeah, every watt counts at some point.
Yep.
Especially if you can avoid running a chiller, not only the cost of the chiller, but the cost of running it.
Yes, of course.
Maintaining it, and then replacing it, and all other things. So that was actually the next one on here, which is if I can run lower. And by lower, I was looking at the charts on your site, and to get the same amount of flow against some other popular pumps like it, half the wattage.
Yes.
Half. So it's not like I shaved off 10% performance.
It's like half of that. Right, yes.
And that means half the heat production from it as well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Wattage and inefficiency, basically.
Right.
Okay. And another thing you can do is you can combine them together to get wattage savings. So what does combined together look like?
Well, it's think of it as a supercharger. So you can actually have the output from one side connect to the intake of the other side. Yep. It's almost like a supercharged engine.
So I've seen this done on two single pumps before, where they'll take the output of one pump and they'll feed it into the input of the other one. And what that does is greatly increases the head pressure as well. Yeah. Right? But also what you can do is combine both of these into one. And get even more flow still have the wattage savings.
Yeah, especially for some tanks that are already built with just single return, right? Then you can take advantage of the wide pipes, and then we can connect both flow into a single return.
Okay, so an example of that
Like
right
that.
there.
Yeah.
Right there. So you can combine the thing together.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, I'm going to go ahead and try to show this, but
right.
you can rotate the heads
Yes.
as well. So this thing right here normally looks like this, but not many pumps can do this. So do you have any, while I'm doing it, any examples as to why you would want to do this?
Right. I mean, for example, some tanks may have a closed loop where they have the pipe, the plumbing already designed to go horizontally instead of vertically. So instead of redoing all the plumbing, you can do something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this thing actually will allow you to rotate them. It's 3 spots. So you can go this way, and that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, this gives you an opportunity. You can see it wasn't really all that difficult to do either. Where this is like a locking plate.
Yep. Just the bottom plate and the locking plate.
Yeah, and then you just kind of twist it, and now I can recreate it back to the way that it was.
Right.
And I now have my Duo back the way it was. So what a really cool kind of pump. This gives you a lot of flexibility. It's kind of like one of those, like, you're pushing the limits.
Yeah.
Have you seen anybody ever do anything like this before?
Not really. When we first launched it, I think we were way ahead of our time. The hobbyists, they just don't understand how they would use this pump in the tank or in the sump, right?
I'm one of them. I didn't get it at first either.
But I think over time, people, especially after we built the skimmers is also using this pump, right? So more people are starting to understand the advantages of having the dual intake and dual output, from the pump we used in the skimmer, and then they figure out, hey, maybe we can use this pump as the main return pump. Yeah.
I will say that you nailed it for me. I had not really considered this until I encountered it on the bigger skimmer, the 6800.
Yeah.
And then I realized you're using one pump. One of them is basically a recirculating pump, and the other one is the foam production pump.
Right.
And I'm like, oh. And I started getting the wheels, turning, like what you could actually do with this if you wanted to. So I think you are correct. Also, for the size of output here, it's pretty small.
Yeah, I mean, comparing to your typical DC return pump, it's like, I mean, considering there's like 2, return, right? So it's
It'd be way bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you had to have 2 return pumps with equal flow, it would take up way more small space than that. And I don't know if I would ever bother doing this, but I think in the box also comes with a cap. So if you ever wanted to, you could actually just cap off this side.
Half of it.
And just pump out one. I guess the only reason that I would suggest doing that is if I got this thing, I'm thinking future forward a little bit.
Yes,
because I got opportunity.
I mean, like I mentioned just now, a lot of people already have the plumbing done, right? Just one return. When you cap off half of it, the other side, they don't get the resistance from the other side. So it's gonna spin a little bit faster. You're getting a little bit more flow on the single side. Of course, it's nothing compared to the dual output, but you're still getting more output from single side. And then maybe when you later upgrade your tank, then you can reuse the pump, but design it such that you have dual, return.
So it'd be like use this side, cap off the other side, but I now have a pump that if I ever wanted to run a side frag tank or ever wanted to put in a manifold, pop the cap off,
put the back thing.
I now have a pump and I didn't have to buy anything.
Exactly.
There you go. Also, if you actually talked about this earlier. If you want more head pressure, you can actually feed itself.
Yeah.
So that was that tube where you go around here. And so basically, like, it's hard to imagine it on here, but if I had like 2 normal pumps, DC pumps, or I guess any kind of pump, you can take the water that's coming out of the top of one of them and feed it into another.
Right.
It's not the most common install, but if you did know that you could do it, all of a sudden getting way better head pressure.
Yeah, I mean, like some people, they have their fish room right on the first floor and the tank in the second floor. And this is one of the ways to, maximize the head pressure to go, that far, but you're gonna lose some flow because of the head pressure. But some people they they just want to have, the fish room on, a basement, and then the main display tank on the, living room.
I'd check out the Maxspect site because they actually show you like a whole bunch of different
Yeah.
configurations
Yep.
that you can use this in. But one of them is right here. It's exactly that. It's taking out the top and feeding it back in here and to get a better head pressure at the other one. So a little bit of an introduction to the different Maxspect pumps, return pumps. It's just a return pump, but you can get better ones for your application.
Mm-hmm.